Hello, everyone. Welcome back to USC Coliseum Chronicles Live on the Voice of College Football. I am Terrence Holton, joined alongside Casey Kasliner. And Casey, Big Ten Media Week in Vegas. We know a lot of people who went there. We unfortunately weren't able to, but that means a lot of things happen. We got some Lincoln Riley quotes. We got some Jaden Mayava. We got not Jaden Mayava, excuse me, Mekhi Lemon. We have all sorts of stuff that we're going to break down later. But the first thing that I think we should jump into, that also means Big Ten preseason media poll is here. The Big 12 did away with theirs. Big Ten did not. I'm going to pop it up on my screen here. But Casey, what's your raw reaction to the Big Ten preseason media poll?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, looking off the bat without giving away any spoilers to what it's going to look like,
I'm sharing my screen right here.
Then never mind.
It'll be 2 seconds later.
Never mind that. I think USC literally dead center in the middle. I think pretty underrated. I think there's a lot of teams on here that we've talked about before, maybe not being as strong. I mean, USC has head-to-head matchups against multiple teams ahead of them. They're playing Oregon, they're playing Michigan, playing Nebraska. So I think that my point is there could be a lot of movement that we couldn't foresee necessarily just by looking at this poll. And you look at the points. The points are interesting, right? Because USC has like way less points than a team like Michigan that I feel like is so unproven. Nearly nearing 100 points less in terms of votes from the voters. And I just think that's really ambiguous to look at. And I understand like the top three to a point, but I mean, seriously, like behind Nebraska and behind Iowa, I just don't really buy into it.
No, I don't either. And Michigan, I think, is a lot higher than USC. I don't know if you see it there. They got one first place vote for their preseason poll. Yeah. Who is voting Michigan as a number one team in the Big Ten when you have Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon there? Even Illinois, who I do think is better than them. But USC coming in, what is that, 9th, 10th? Dare I say disrespectful. I think they're a better team than Iowa and Nebraska. Probably Indiana too. We've talked about it in the show. I'm not a big fan of Kurt Signetti. I think he's running from a lot of teams so he can get easy wins. We saw this week. They basically paid the equivalent to $900,000. Oh my gosh. They paid the equivalent to $900,000 to play Austin, PA instead of Virginia. That's what it amounted to. I think it's ridiculous that a team like that is going to be over USC.
I agree. I mean, also, I mean, to your point, I don't think they're above Nebraska or Iowa. Like, I think those teams kind of get disrespected by being behind Indiana. Look, I know Indiana was in the college football playoff last year, but I feel like that was an experiment. That wasn't necessarily them.
Well, let's be real. It was a fluke.
It was a fluke. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. They bring in Mendoza. He's a good quarterback, but I don't know if he's going to necessarily solve all their issues. They got to strengthen their defense. They're not a great team, and I agree with you. I think they're completely taking advantage of loopholes in the scheduling, and they're acting as if the SEC teams do it all the time. But that's not necessarily always true. Like Texas is playing Arizona State, for example. It's not like the SEC teams always schedule bad teams. It happens a lot, but they're acting like it's this thing that happens every single time, and that they're using it as an excuse. So the point is, I digress. I agree with you. I think Indiana is a team that is on fraud watch.
Yeah. This is not an Indiana podcast, though, so we're not going to talk about Indiana. We'll talk about USC. So why do we think that the writers at the media are not very high on USC this season?
That's a good question. I think my response off the bat would be that USC is unproven in a lot of positions, including the quarterback position, just because Jaden Mayava hasn't played a full season at USC. His really good breakout year, he was 2 years ago as a freshman. I think there's that. I also think the D-line as well. Still the defense. I mean, the defense has only had 1 year under Danton Lynn. But then my counterpoint to that would be, okay, you look at these teams in the Big Ten, a lot of them are unproven. Dare I say, even a team like Oregon with a lot of roster changes isn't that proven. Their quarterback has played, a handful of snaps I could count probably on, 2 hands. At UCLA, he comes over. And I mean, look, there are a couple of teams in here. Penn State, Ohio State are the two that I'm like, yeah, they're proven. But, Michigan is one of them that's not. Obviously, I mentioned Oregon, even Indiana. I think USC gets hurt because of the unproven angle. But I think at the same time, they have guys like Jacoby Lane, Mekhi Lemon, who prove that their game is going to be sustainable for next year and years to come.
Yeah, I agreed. I'm just highlighting two comments from Chris here. I'll go back to the first one real quick. Yeah, the O-line is a strength, and I think it's very possible they compete for Big Ten title. I do agree, or I would argue also that it does come down a lot to Jaden and his decision-making, which we've talked about a lot. Just him being able to put the ball in the right place, but I do completely agree that if the O-line is good, then USC easily is a top 4 team in the Big Ten. Then just kind of going down the line. Indiana's, as we talked about a tiny bit earlier, they have set up with the easy schedules ever. Last year, they made the playoff. They were so good at making it seem like they were competitive in the games they weren't. In the 2 games they lost to Ohio State, Notre Dame, sure as the 2 teams in the national title, those games were never once close. And they made it seem at the end by the scores that they kind of were. They were never once close. And they're going to probably do that relatively again, probably win 9 games. The games they mentioned here, Illinois, Oregon, Penn State, I do think they'll lose all of those. But USC, I do agree. Going back to you, Casey, sorry. I do agree it's a lot of unproven, especially since Jaden's played 3 games in the Big Ten. Well, no, 2 games. Yeah, 3 games in the Big Ten, excuse me. Then 1 obviously versus SEC, Notre Dame. And he was pretty solid in those. You obviously do see the cracks in those. We talk about him week in and week out, as we should, obviously. But a lot of these other teams are decently unproven. There's, I'd say 4. What is there? There's 3 other quarterbacks. 1, 2, 3, 4 quarterbacks. 5, I'll include Ohio State here, whose quarterbacks have not thrown the ball as much as Jaden in the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the teams above are a little bit more rounded. Ohio State's the Illinois, I think is going to be a good team. But Iowa, Mark Gronowski coming over from South Dakota, the FCS. Bryce Underwood, obviously a freshman. The other guy, Mikey Keene from Fresno State. Julian Sano, Ohio State. Dante Moore at Oregon. I don't see how you can see that. And obviously, like I said, the teams are some of those definitely probably better around them, like Oregon, Ohio State. I don't know how you see those guys at quarterback and think, yeah, they're just definitely worse than Jaden Maiava. I did see, and talk for a second, because I did see another list.
Yeah.
It's paywall, so I can't show it. But from the Athletic.
No, yeah. I mean, my sort of rounding thoughts on this are there's the unproven part. And then you also look at, some of the teams behind USC. And I think Washington gets a little disrespected as well, just because, I mean, maybe not from a placement standpoint, but the points. Because, Denzel Boston's an elite player. Damon Williams is probably going to be a pretty good quarterback. We obviously a small sample size too, but that's every Big Ten quarterback. And again, I just think it's one of those things where USC is going to have a chip on their shoulder and let this be a point of motivation. And they're going to want to make a statement those first 3 games that feel like, easily winnable games. So I think that's going to be a big point of motivation. And if it's not, then they got to build the culture more. Because I think this is like one of those things where they have to rise to the occasion and understand where they're being judged.
Yeah, and agree with this, Chris. In my opinion, he's the 3rd best quarterback in the Big Ten. I think he's going to be, at least projecting wise. Speaking on the quarterbacks more, though, a little bit, this is not a good quarterback conference this year. It's just not. That's just kind of the reality, especially when you look at the SEC and the Big 12. There's a lot of great quarterbacks in those conferences. And I'm not saying that no one is going to emerge and be great in the Big Ten. I just think that, and obviously this is a preseason poll, but there's a lot of guys with a lot of potential at quarterback in the Big Ten. You look at your Jaden Maiavas. I'll throw Dante Moore in there. Your Damon Williams. There's so much potential for these guys to move up that I think that we just have to take all these preseason polls with a grain of salt, because we could see Maiava breakout. We could see Damon Williams lead them far. And because of that, I just think that the preseason poll means nothing, because the quarterbacks, you don't know who's going to be good. So maybe someone like Jaden Damon, they'll show out, they'll lead their team to the promised land.
Yeah, agreed. And I think my last thing is, I mean, even across the board, even at the teams we didn't really look at, I mean, Minnesota's going to have a new QB situation.
Yeah.
Obviously, UCLA is, a few other teams as well. I'm not off the top of my head, but there's a couple returning in that second column of the back nine.
A lot of them. I mean, Wisconsin is, Rutgers has Callie McManus, Maryland new quarterback, Northwestern new quarterback, Purdue new quarterback. Now they're obviously not really threats anywhere, but a lot of new quarterbacks in the Big Ten.
Yep. No, good point.
Yeah. All right. Well, Casey, unless you have any other concluding thoughts on the Big Ten preseason media poll, like we said, should take this all with a grain of salt. It means nothing. It's possible that, USC finishes second in the Big Ten, could finish 12th. Who knows? So that's all there. But Casey, it's obviously, as we mentioned, it's Big Ten Media Week. What were you seeing from Lincoln Riley, or hearing, I should say, that really stood out to you? I'm going to stop sharing my screen here.
For sure. Yeah, I think the first thing we should definitely talk about is the whole Notre Dame USC rivalry situation. Obviously, the rivalry is going to expire, or is set to expire in 2026. And so that basically means USC and Notre Dame have to come to an agreement at some point soon within the next year. And when Lincoln Riley was asked about it, he was very adamant that he wants this rivalry to continue, sort of like shutting down all of the sort of rumors that USC didn't want to. But of course, it could be all just, talk. But I'll read the direct quote. He said, and I quote, "My very first thought when hired as the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma was I get to coach OU versus Texas." And then continuing the quote, he said, "When I decided to take the USC job, my first thought was I get to coach USC versus Notre Dame. Do I want to play the game? Hell yeah. I'm hopeful we can get to the point where it makes sense. The two schools are in radically different situations, one in a conference," end quote. What do you take from that?
I take almost nothing from that. You can say that all you want, but at the end of the day, I just don't feel like he's that into the USC Notre Dame rivalry like a lot of others are. Like, maybe that's just me personally. I just don't feel like he has the same commitment that a lot of the fans, that a lot of even through the players, the supporters really have. Supporters, fans, same thing. The coaches, the players really have. Some of the people in the front office now, you can say, about college football. I don't think he has the same commitment to USC Notre Dame that they do.
I wonder what Chad Bowden's thoughts on it are. I'm not sure if he's gone on record and talked about it, because he's obviously a former Notre Dame guy.
Right.
And I'm sure he has equal decision-making power to Lincoln Riley on if they play Notre Dame or not.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe not equal, but pretty close, I'd say.
Yeah.
He's the GM. He's been here less time, but he knows the rivalry just as much as Lincoln does. Because on the other side of it, at least. So that's one thing I question too, because you brought up the front office, and that's such a new thing. We don't know what their perspective on the whole thing is. We do know that it's been sort of a dodgy situation though from USC. And I mean, look, we talked about it when it happened, about how USC was sort of pretending to act interested in renewing it by like giving like a 1 or 2 year deal. But let's be real. This is a rivalry that Notre Dame wants, and most of the fans want forever. Like, this is over 100-year-old rivalry. I think it's actually 99 years at this point. So it's nearing a century of play. And I just think USC offering a 1 or 2 year deal was pretty insulting at the time. So for Lincoln Riley, to how it circles back to today, I think Lincoln Riley acting like that was never a thing is a little weird to me. I mean, look, he has to give like his answer at the podium, but at the same time, him saying the schools are in radically different situations, like they have been forever. Like, one's not in a conference, one is. I don't know what else he might be referring to. I mean, Notre Dame is obviously just coming off a national title appearance. So I don't know if it has anything to do with that, because that would be sort of a weak thing to say.
Very.
But my point is, I think it's just sort of a weird situation where SC is acting committed, but I don't know if they really are.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And that's just kind of what we've seen about this rivalry the past couple months. That, like I said, that quote doesn't mean anything to me. You can say all this. What I have learned from college football, there is no loyalty. There is nothing within these coaches. If they can do what they think is best for them, maybe even the program, they are going to do that. If that means getting one more win instead of playing Notre Dame, and then maybe in a different year you'll play like Ole Miss, someone else, get a little parity in there, then I think they would do that. That's all they really care about. They care about winning. They care about themselves. That is what I've seen from a lot of coaches. So I don't really, unless I see like on paper them agree to a new like extension with the deal, I'm not going to believe it's happening because it's on, like you mentioned, it's only a year out.
Yeah, and I mean, one other thing that they do care about is money. And I'd imagine the Notre Dame USC rivalry is pretty profitable. But in the same vein, USC scheduling LSU week 1 at Allegiant Stadium last year, and I'm using that game as an example of something that could replace a Notre Dame game in the future,
Right.
like you mentioned, playing an SEC team. Like that was probably an even bigger revenue driver. And the fact that USC won against LSU was huge, and it put USC on the map a little bit, even though their season didn't end up the way maybe it intended to be. So my point is, I mean, let's be real. USC has taken a beating at the hands of Notre Dame these, past few decades or so, really the post Pete Carroll days. And at the same time, USC is always looking for the new thing. They were looking for the new conference. They were looking for the new football facility. I could probably name a bunch of other things. They're looking for the new GM. They were looking for the new defensive coordinator. They are in a new direction, for better or for worse.
Mm-hmm.
So, to your point, I definitely agree. They probably are seeing this Notre Dame rivalry and thinking, look, we want to honor our heritage, and our heritage is playing UCLA and Notre Dame every year. It doesn't matter who else we play. But at the same time, it's not the flashy new toy that USC loves. It's an old rivalry that USC has been owned in for these past few decades, and now they're trying to act like they never thought that way at all. That's what I think.
It's a good point. It'll be weird, especially all have graduated, but hypothetically you'll be going into your senior year. It would be a year where USC Notre Dame, it would be on campus, so hypothetically that game doesn't happen. You instead get week 3 versus Fresno State. What's your reaction as a student?
I would be really disappointed. I mean, it says it in my subtitle. I'm a USC football broadcaster, so I want to call the coolest games. I want to call the best games. And I mean, USC Notre Dame, even though it's been a one-sided rivalry, the games have still been good. Like last year was a good game objectively. The year before at South Bend was not as good, but still, it's a rivalry that I want to see continue as a student. And I think the students, this is a whole other conversation, a whole other can of worms. I think the students need to embrace this rivalry a bit more because I think, obviously USC fans, we have our thoughts on the culture of the fan base. You and I know we do. But I feel like the UCLA rivalry is hyped up so much for how little of an impact of a game it has usually on either USC or UCLA's record, usually because USC is way better than UCLA and the game just doesn't really hold that much merit. But at the same time,
sorry, I was just going to say last year they met at 5 wins and 4 wins respectively.
Exactly.
Keep your bowl hopes alive. That's what the game was for. It was for bowl eligibility. That is not where that rivalry wants to be.
And I think Notre Dame USC, it's one of those games that can define seasons. I think it definitely did in 2023. It did in 2022. This year, maybe not so much for USC, but it certainly did for Notre Dame. It's definitely a situation that I think the fans need to rally behind it, but that's a really hard operation to take on.
Right. Chris, we appreciate the donation. You're always in here at 10 a.m. I know this time is not great, but Chris, we always appreciate it. You're in here commenting, talking along with us. We love it. We love talking with you guys. Like we said, as soon as our summer internships ends, we're going to get an actual good time where it'll be easier for people to get to. But Chris, we really appreciate you as always. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
But while you were talking, Casey, also talking here, we're going to bring up some of the other things that Riley and those players mentioned, but the new strength coach bringing discipline to the team. This is one thing that we've seen over the last couple of years of bringing in Danton Lynn, bringing in that new defensive coaching staff, and now a new strength coach. The discipline that the players, the coaches are speaking about is just so much better. That is what we are seeing from this. Because with the Alex Grinch, I mean, the quotes that we are getting out of practice right after Danton Lynn was hired versus when Alex Grinch was in charge, it was like, oh yeah, we're tackling in practice. What? How is that like the standard? So like it's just like the general just being able to bring discipline, to be a better team, to want to be better. I think we're seeing, as we've mentioned a lot, Chad Bowden is in this, the culture shift in USC. It's getting better. This may not be the year that USC contends for a national title, but next year, I was reading an ESPN article. It mentioned like next year, like this may be the year that buys, enough time to bring in the cavalry, as it said, for the 2026 guys, for some of the transfer guys. So that is what we are looking out for.
Yeah, and this is probably going to sound like a broken record, but USC is not in the Pac-12 anymore. And so by default, the strength, the conditioning, that all, has to meet a certain new level of a standard that USC needs to be at. And so I think by bringing in Tremaine Carroll, a guy with plenty of experience, a team that, like you said, lacked a lot of discipline and probably saw the Pac-12 as, the Pac-12 never gets in the CFP. Or, our expectations are here. We'll meet those expectations. It's huge to now be in the Big Ten. And I think a lot of people who don't really know about USC football will look at the Big Ten move and say, oh, it's an awful move. Look at USC. They're only winning 5-6 games and they destroyed the Pac-12. Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? The move to the Big Ten is not only going to give them a ton of benefits from, all the other stuff we already know, like money, but also I feel like from a culture standpoint, just being in that level of competitiveness every week is going to do wonders for this team. And we didn't see it in year one because they weren't fully adjusted yet. We could see it in year two. I think we'll definitely see it in 2026.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the Pete Carroll, I'll even throw in early Lane Kiffin era of the team, and Sark for that matter. Those teams were disciplined. They didn't let you score. Look at that. Is it 07, 08 team? Which one? I'm forgetting the exact one, but allowed 7.5 points per game. Maybe it was 6.5. I'm forgetting the exact figure. They were one of the best defenses college football has ever seen, on par with those Miami teams, those 2001 Miami teams that people always bring up. That 07 USC defense was one of, if not the best, that college football has ever seen. Then I think you get to a Pac-12 era where things start to sag off a little bit. Oregon starts to take over a little bit. Chip Kelly, the DeAnthony Thomas, Marcus Mariota, that just run and gun offense, outscore your opponent by as much as possible. It's a race to 50. That kind of era of the Pac-12 takes over, in my opinion. I think USC adjusts to that a little bit, but loses what they had at defense, what they had so well in the 2000s, which was a, first off, phenomenal offense, obviously, but also a suffocating defense. Because you look at teams like some of the USC teams that actually did succeed in the Pac-12. You look at Sam Darnold's team. You look at Caleb Williams' team. They were fantastic. The offense was going to give you 50, 45, whatever it was. They're going to outscore the other team. The defense was going to give up 40. That was the problem. Now I think we're seeing a shift back to a point where offense will give you 30, 35. Defense is going to give up 20 to less. And we're inching down. It's a baby steps. But if you look at where the defense is scoring, I think they're allowing 31, I want to say, Alex Grinch's final year. They averaged 22, 20 last year, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. That is astronomical. We get, obviously, extended Danton. We got to make sure he doesn't go anywhere. Because I think if USC has another great defensive year, he will be a prime head coaching candidate. But that's just kind of what I think. Just shifting from what USC was in the 2000s, 2010s, that little high power offensive phase in the Pac-12, back to now in the Big Ten, you have to shoot back to consistent offense and defense.
Yeah, and I think I agree. And I think the biggest thing for the defense too is last year, the really big thing they struggle with is allowing that big play, like that one big breakthrough play to happen that, like, the Michigan game. Mm-hmm. Do you not agree?
No, because I don't fully disagree, but I just think when you look at it, they were so much better at limiting big plays comparatively. No, that's all I know.
I agree with that. I'm just saying one defining play of, from an opposing offense, there were a few games that featured, like stuff like that. I don't, maybe Notre Dame is the exception because the 2 pick sixes, but there were plays where they were letting break loose. Kalel Mullings, versus Michigan, versus Washington. There were some late plays from Will Rogers that put Washington in prime position to score late and put the game out of reach. There were games where the defense was, by and large, I completely agree, by and large, way better than what we've seen. But I think the big test is, okay, you're on the road at the Shoe, you're on the road at Michigan, you're at Autzen Stadium. Can you limit that one play that Oregon needs or Michigan needs to win the game? Lincoln Riley blamed that every week, and so I'm not necessarily preaching to what he said, but he said, we're 4 plays away from being 5-0 or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm talking about. It's not necessarily an excuse, but it's more like, just make that not happen.
Yeah. No, I do agree, because I hate that answer because it's such a cop-out. At the same time, it is true that they were realistically just a few plays away from 9 wins. So you can't fully disagree with him. I hate that answer because it's just an excuse for losing, which is stupid, and I hate that.
Bad luck. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's stupid. Speaking more about just the whole discipline of the team, think about it last year. That was one of the best third down defenses in the country. It was most of the time I knew if it got to third down, they were probably going to get a stop. I mean, the exception is that I'll think Penn State, because Tyler Warren was just unguardable that game until the fourth quarter when they realized, I think Drew Allar's going to throw it to Tyler Warren. Yeah, guys, I could have told you that 3 quarters earlier. But it was one of the best third down defenses in the country. And I think they're just going to get even better. I think the defense, we've talked about this in length, but I think the defense is going to be the best part of the team. And I think they'll be one of the best in the Big Ten. And I don't think people are ready for that. Obviously, you lost a lot of guys, but especially that linebacker position, bring in some big guys. You bring in Keyshawn Silver, you bring in Ja Jarrett. I think it's going to be good. And also, DJ Harvey is the highest graded PFF cornerback in the Big Ten.
That's really exciting.
Of course, that was coming from San Jose State to the Big Ten, so it's a little different. But
yeah. But it's even more exciting knowing that he came from, a G6 program like San Jose State, which is a good program, but you always question the level of competition changing. Right. I want to ask you, we were looking at the Big Ten media quotes, and Lincoln Riley was asked about his biggest regret at USC, and he gave a very interesting answer. I'll read it out. The quote is, quote, "We went heavy in the portal in year 2, so 2023, trying to capitalize on that, which is probably the toughest decision, the one we went back and forth on the most. If you ask me, my biggest regret up to this point, that's probably it," end quote. What's your take on that?
I'm going to ask, I'm a little confused by the wording of it. We talked about this a little bit pre-show, but I am a little confused by the wording of it. Does that mean he wanted to go full in on the transfers?
Maybe. I agree. I'm with you. It's confusing because we know that USC had one of the better recruiting classes in 2023 toward the top, and the transfer class was pretty good as well. So, I was confused on that quote. I didn't hear it correctly. Maybe it was misquoted. This is a transcript, but I'm assuming it's not. This is, from.
No, I don't know what he's regretting about it because, I think maybe he was saying could have gone more in on the transfers. But at the same time, you brought in 3 5-star recruits that you thought you were going to be the future of your program. All 3 have since transferred out. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a problem. They weren't the best. But is he saying more on the transfers? Because like we said, it was a pretty good transfer class too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was a transfer class that was not very top heavy because the top 2 rated recruits according to 247 were Traquan Fagans and Bear Alexander, and those 2 did not pan out for USC, obviously. And then you look at the next 2, though. Emmanuel Pregnon, you can say all you want about him being a traitor. He is, but he was very good for USC last year. Yeah. And then Anthony Lucas, who is a beast. So
Anthony Lucas was fantastic till he got injured. There's other guys on here, too. Obviously, Marshawn Lloyd, he's second string, third string on the Packers. Dealt with a lot of injuries last year. Christian Roland Wallace, though, he was getting snaps for the Chiefs last year. Eddie Chablitsky, obviously, best punter in football. My highlight of USC games last year was watching big leg Eddie kick that ball. So, which is sad, but Eddie was fantastic. So I don't know, because that was a pretty decent transfer class.
Yeah, Dorian Singer was a flop, but that's
unfortunately. I was really excited about him too.
Yeah, weird career.
Yeah, Casey, can I ask you what would you say? Put yourself in Lincoln Riley's shoes. What is your biggest regret of your time at USC?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Okay, I think not. I mean, I think this is sort of the low-hanging fruit answer, but that's probably what he would say. I think not emphasizing the local recruiting path earlier, and also not emphasizing the defense earlier, and also sort of being I think the last thing I'd say as a regret is thinking that Oklahoma philosophy will translate seamlessly to USC.
Yeah.
I.e. Alex Grinch coming over and absolutely destroying the defense and setting it back 5 years. Those are my sort of like three things that all work together that I think would be his biggest regret. But what about you? That's a great question.
No, that's a good one. Those are both good. I'll add on. I'll do one from just last year because you had two good ones from previous years. I will say, and maybe controversial because guy earned the spot, not starting Jaden Maiava week 1. Because think about it. Obviously, Miller was fantastic in that LSU game. But some of the other games, you look at Michigan, look at Penn State, he was not fantastic in those games. And honestly, I'll blame Michigan a little bit less on him. He had no time in the pocket whatsoever and still wasn't horrible. But you throw Jaden in there, a guy who can run the ball. So
he just fits the Lincoln Riley offense so much more. If like Lincoln Riley was tunnel vision from day one, he was like, I have to start Miller because I owe it to Miller. He's waited this long. And
in fairness, he did throw 6 touchdowns in the Holiday Bowl.
He did, but against a ranked team too, a highly ranked Louisville team.
An ACC runner-up, yeah.
Yeah, so I respect it. At the same time, it's one game, and then that was before Jaden came in. So, I just think it's one of those things where it's a business first. I feel like the business decision would be starting Maiava, or at least giving him more looks in games early. So,
yeah, I'm just thinking about it. No, I agree with all that.
Yeah, what else could he have regretted? There's a lot of games that went one way or the other, but if we look at big picture stuff, I think he's done good for the program. I wonder how much he can actually take credit for. Like the Bloom facility, I think is going to set this program ahead.
Yeah,
ahead of the pack. There's a lot of stuff from a institutional standpoint that I think are very high right now, but I just don't know.
Yeah, Chris. Yeah. Like we mentioned, third down obviously was great last year. It was the fourth down where teams could just kind of punch it in right after, just like get those yards. And if it was 4th and short, 4th and medium, whatever, that's where they punched in there.
Yeah, they got to play 4-down football, not 3-down football. I felt like that was a lot of the issues. That was a big issue in 2023 as well. I just feel like they need to think ahead, and I feel like they're a program that sort of looks ahead on a lot of things. So I think they should apply that to 4th down.
Feels fair. All right, Casey. Well, I think we may have to wrap things up here. Once again, we apologize for the short shows and inconvenient time. We're going to get better stuff once we are out of our summer internships. But Casey, any concluding thoughts?
No, I think, we got some good takeaways from Big Ten Media Days. I think we'll have some more quotes and stuff. I think practices are starting this week. Really excited for that, and we'll have coverage on that. When we get back to USC, we'll be able to attend practice, so that'll be huge as well.
Yeah, it'll be great. All right, well, that's going to do it for us here at USC Coliseum Chronicles Live, the voice of college football. Everyone, have a great Friday.